All right. Good afternoon. My name is Leslie Telford Kettering, and I'm here today with Gary Kettering. Gary and I are the owners of Mediation Services of Southern Florida and Mediation Services, LLC. We're going to be talking with you today about mediating hurricane and other first-party insurance claims here in Florida. And before I go any further, let me tell you a little bit about us. First of all, we are circuit civil, family, and appellate mediators here in the state of Florida. We are also able to mediate in Kentucky, in Georgia, and in Louisiana. I've been doing this for 20 plus years, but I've been mediating part-time. Prior to 2019, I was a full-time practicing attorney. We are members of AMSIN, and we are affiliate members, and we had the fortune of being able to visit New Zealand in October of last year. You can find out more about us by looking at the website, which is right under Gary's caption. And that'll tell you a little bit more about our qualifications. I'm also an arbiter, and I am an alternate special master for code enforcement here in the city of Sarasota. I'm going to turn it over to Gary. He's going to tell you a little bit about him and some of his qualifications and how long he has been doing this. Gary, take it away.
Thank you, Leslie. Yes, I am a non-lawyer mediator.
You are going to stop you. You're going to have to speak up.
Okay. I am a non-lawyer mediator. I've been doing mediations for a little over 21 years. I am a circuit civil, county, and family and appellate mediator here in Florida. And like Leslie indicated, we're registered to do mediations in several states, Kentucky, Louisiana, and Georgia. And we are affiliate members of AMSIN down in New Zealand. Just recently, I was inducted into an organization here in the United States called the National Academy of Distinguished Neutrals. This is a very prestigious organization, and it's got some stringent requirements to get into. But we'll get into that maybe a little bit later. Here in the state of Florida, they have programs and different classifications as far as mediation is concerned. Most of the classifications say circuit civil mediation. You have to attend a 40-hour course. Then there are mentorships where you gather points for attending mediations and co-mediating with a mediator to become a certified mediator with the state. Okay, this is a certification. It's not a license. Okay, that's one test question that they have on the test. But in any case, also to maintain your status as a mediator, you have to do continuing education courses during a 2-year period, and you have to have 16 hours of continuing education for your family, county, and circuit civil mediation requirement. The main focus of my practice is in first-party insurance cases, debt collection, and also hurricane mediations. So that's basically my qualifications as far as becoming and maintaining as a mediator here in the United States.
Well, thank you, Gary. Rather than going into everything that we need to do in order to maintain our certification, the best thing for folks to do if they're interested in the requirements to become a Florida mediator is to go to the Department website and look up how to become a Florida mediator. I'm not going to talk about that any longer because this is stuff that you all can look up if you want to. What we're here to talk about is we're here to talk about first-party insurance claims or hurricane claims. And the reason we decided to prepare this is that back in February, New Zealand had a cyclone, Gabrielle, and that did some extensive damage in New Zealand. And one of the things is that we did attend a webinar, and as we were listening to that, we began to realize that while hurricanes are a normal fact of life here in Florida, they're unusual in New Zealand, and you might benefit from knowing how we have learned to mediate these insurance claims. So let me talk with you a little bit about Florida, because Florida and New Zealand obviously are very different. Florida is a peninsula. The majority of our population are recent Floridians, and they are mostly congregated on the coast, except for those folks that have moved themselves into the Orlando area. The interior part of the state has a great amount of agriculture, but most of the houses, most of the dwellings are on the coast. We're flat. The highest elevation in the state of Florida is Sugarloaf Mountain. I kid you not, that's what it's called. And it is 95 meters. So it's huge. Hurricane season here runs from June until December. And we have hurricanes before June. We have hurricanes after December. But that's the official start of the hurricane season. Hurricanes are not the only weather that impacts us. Before they become hurricanes, they're tropical lows, they're depressions, they're tropical storms. All of these can do a great amount of damage to homes and people's property. When it becomes a hurricane, when these become tropical storms or hurricanes, they all get a name. And we refer to them as by their name. So the bigger ones are what we call Category 4 and Category 5 storms. And these are considered major storms. But bear in mind that the 1 and 2 category storms can do a great deal of damage to structures and disrupt people's lives. So a little bit about Florida and some of the hurricanes that we have had to deal with. Recently, we have had a number of major storms, but I want to put this in perspective for you because many people were unprepared for these storms when they came in. The last major hurricane prior to Hurricane Charlie in 2004 to come into the southwest coast of Florida was in 1960, and that was Hurricane Donna. Now, we have had tropical storms, we have had brushes with hurricanes on this coast, but nothing that compared to Donna. Hurricane Charlie was a major storm, and it came into the west coast of Florida. Now, prior to Charlie, the last major storm to hit Florida was Hurricane Andrew. And to give you an idea of the devastation of Andrew, Andrew was a Cat 5 hurricane, and we refer to them as Cat 5s or Cat 4s. It was a Cat 5 hurricane. 64,000 homes in Homestead in Miami were destroyed by Andrew. But Andrew had, Andrew was in memory. It hadn't been, we hadn't had a major one for many, many years. So when Charlie came in, nobody was prepared for it. Nobody was thinking in terms of how much devastation it could cause. And it went right into Punta Gorda and Port Charlotte. It went in as a Category 4 storm, and it went right up the center of the state. It went through Arcadia, it went through Orlando, and it came out in Daytona. It came out in Daytona as a Category 1. And Gary and I were in Daytona for a conference when Charlie came through. I can tell you that a Category 1 storm is a serious storm. You remember that, don't you, Gary, being up in that hotel with those windows rocking and not being able to open any of the doors?
Absolutely. And we were in one of the better hotels that actually had an electric generator for the whole hotel. And many of the hotels and a lot of the homes had nothing, and there was no electricity whatsoever in that community after the Cat 1 hurricane. So, and let me point out one thing real quick. If you're not familiar with Florida, if you look at a map, Florida, like Leslie says, is a peninsula. It's about 120 to 150 miles wide, and these storms can roar in into the Gulf of Mexico as a Cat 1, and within a matter of hours spin up to Cat 5 status. So that, you can look at a storm and say, oh, well, it's just a Cat 1, and go to bed and wake up the next morning and you've got a Cat 5 coming in at you. So it's not something you want to take lightly. So that's my 2 cents.
All right. Well, we've had more, during that year and the next year, we had a lot of hurricanes, but we're not going to talk about those because they really don't have bearing on the mediations that we were doing. The next big one was Irma, and that one again came into the West Coast. That one came into Marco Island and Naples. It came as a Category 4 storm, caused a significant amount of damage, and that one stayed more to the coast, but it did impact Orlando as well. Most recently, we have had Hurricane Ian, and that came in September 22nd or 29th, 2022. That was a monstrous storm, and the flood impact was tremendous. The destruction was tremendous. What you see behind Gary is Mexico Beach. Mexico Beach was Hurricane Michael. These photos were taken 6 months after the hurricane came ashore, and it wiped out Mexico Beach. Now, Florida not only has hurricanes, but we also have thunderstorms, we have hail, we have tornadoes, we have flooding events. Just this year, Broward County had 25 inches of rain in 48 hours. They were flooded. So everybody in Florida typically has homeowners insurance, oftentimes flood insurance if they're smart, as well as wind insurance for damages that might be caused by the hurricane. Now, after Charlie came through, that's back in 2004, the Florida Department of Financial Services is the department that is in charge of insurance. And they had set up an alternative dispute resolution program or a mediation program. And what that does is that it has an enabling statute, and it also has some rules. And again, I'm not going to go through all of these because they're very quickly available by just Googling them. And the statute is 627.7015, and the rule is FAC Rule 69J-166.031. Again, 627.7015, and the rule is 69J -166.031. There are lots of things in those rules, and if you're interested in trying to work one of these programs, you're trying to set up one of these programs, you might want to take a look at that. But one of the things is that Charlie was probably the first real test of the alternative dispute resolution program. And what they did is that there was nothing left in Punta Gorda. I mean, there were, houses were destroyed, people were living in cars, they brought FEMA trailers in, and they had to have some way of resolving disputes. So what they did initially, everyone thought that this was a great idea. And that is that everybody will meet at the homeowner's home. That includes the homeowner, the mediator, the adjuster for the insurance company. And if the homeowner has a representative, these folks are known as public adjusters. We call them PAs. They'd all meet at the homeowner's home and sit down and discuss how they were going to resolve the claim. We didn't do mediations at that time for insurance claims, but Gary's talked with some people that did. What was their take, Gary, on mediating in the homeowner's home?
Well, anytime you've got one of these disasters, your home is left with holes in the roof, no electricity, limited water, limited supplies. And so a lot of these people were devastated and not real happy at the time. And they've been living in these homes for as much as maybe 6 months without any electricity. And so it was limited resources. Also, since they were in such dire straits at the time, it wasn't unusual for arguments to break out and a lot of venting on the part of the homeowner. And this was not real conducive with getting the settlements that they needed. At that time, the Department of Finance, which oversees the insurance industry, was also using government offices to do mediations, but because of the devastation, not only to homes, but also to office buildings, these were limited. So the office space to do these mediations was often not available, or if it was available, it would be several weeks before you could get an appointment to use one of their rooms. So.
Well, now, didn't one of our friends say that when he walked in as a mediator to one of these in-home mediations, that he was making sure that he had a clear path to the exit and that there were no weapons or anything that could be used as a weapon close by?
Absolutely. Security was always questionable. You didn't know whether somebody had guns, knives, hand grenades, whatever that they wanted to use on the insurance rep. And sometimes the mediator could be taken out as collateral damage also. So it was
so this
to cut it short,
it was not a good idea.
It was not an ideal situation or a place to take and do mediations. So,
well, what they did is that they brought in trailers.
house trailers.
And they would bring, and they brought the trailers right into Port Charlotte and Punta Gorda. And the mediators, Port Charlotte mediators, and there were a number of them, would come into those trailers and they would start mediating first thing in the morning, and they would mediate until 6 or 8 o'clock at night, and they would do that 6 days, 5 or 6 days a week. They were able to mediate a lot of cases that way. And so the mediation program, in reference to the area that was most impacted, was successful from the standpoint of getting these things done. Now, years later, and not a lot of years later in what I call hurricane time, but about 13 years later, we had Irma blow in. And at this time, Port Charlotte and Punta Gorda are different than Naples, which is what was impacted most greatly. There were places that were not flattened. So the mediations then were occurring in Naples or wherever the homeowner lived. Now, what the program did at that time is that if you were, and this is when we got into doing insurance mediations, if you were interested in doing this, you would sign up for the counties that you were willing to cover. And we covered probably all the way down from, I'm thinking Pasco County, all the way down to Naples. most of the claims that we had to mediate were in the Naples area. And Gary put a lot of miles on his truck going back and forth to Naples. Everyone, it would be up to him to locate the facility, and this was typically a public library. He would then clear the time with the insurance adjuster, and if the homeowner was represented by the homeowner's representative, whether that would be the public adjuster or it would be the attorney representing the homeowner. These mediations were more often than not requested by the homeowner. And you can see why, because for the insurance carrier and for the public adjusters, these folks would have to make 2-hour trips in order to get to the county where the homeowner was located. We did not do these remotely. These were all in person. But it was a successful program. And again, the mediations resulted in settlements related to these claims. When COVID occurred, we'd already had a couple more hurricanes that had come through since Irma, and specifically two, I'm just going to refer to them as Sally and Michael. Sally went into Pensacola, lots and lots of damage there. Michael just destroyed areas like Mexico Beach. So we couldn't do in-person mediations. And what occurred is that we all ended up starting to use Zoom mediation. This turned out to be, although I will say that almost all of the mediators and everyone else was dragged into Zoom kicking and screaming. I know, Gary, you were not initially a fan of Zoom mediations. But what we discovered is, like the homeowner mediations where you go into the home, it sounded like a good idea at the time, but it was a disaster. The Zoom mediations turned out to be very beneficial to everybody involved. And why is that? Because first of all, you can have qualified mediators mediating throughout the state of Florida, because I can mediate a case in Naples, Florida in the morning, and in the afternoon, I could mediate a case in Pensacola, which is a 10-hour drive if I were doing it otherwise. The insurance adjusters could stay at their desks with all of their files and all of their computers to take a look at things. And the public adjusters, a lot of them came from, very large metropolitan areas. They could represent the homeowner from their office. And some of them even were doing it from their car. Not only that, the homeowner didn't have to take a full day off of work. They could, if they cleared it with their boss, go into a break room, go home, go out. I mean, I've even had them done in their car. Most of them stopped driving the car. I know you had one where they were continually driving the car as you were trying to do the mediation, but that's a story for another day. No participants were injured in that mediation, but a lot of folks got real seasick. In any event, it worked. And what happened is that the insurance carriers began using the Department of Financial Services mediation program. So there was a huge influx of cases that were going into the Department of Financial Services mediation program, and the mediators were able to mediate all throughout the state. That also created a huge influx of mediators as well. But that is what we have been doing, and it has been working out well. So I don't think that we're going to be going back to in-person mediation. I think that they were talking about it, and everybody said, no, 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 no. This works out better for everybody. So that's the history of this really very successful mediation program in Florida. We are getting a lot of these cases resolved, but getting them resolved requires that you do some preparation. And Gary was absolutely instrumental in designing mediation services preparation program. And mediation services, the two of us, he said, you're going to go take these courses and learn how to talk insurance, which I did. But Gary, would you tell everybody what you did in order to be able to get yourself prepared for these mediations?
Sure. Thank you very much, Leslie. When I came into the program, I remember talking to some of the other DFS mediators, and I asked them, well, what's your success rate on getting these cases settled? And they said, oh, we only settle about 30% of them. And I said, wow, that's doesn't seem quite right. And when I was talking with some of the adjusters about why these mediations weren't being successful, the information I got over and over again was that a lot of the mediators weren't familiar with construction and weren't familiar with the industry or the insurance industry and the terminology that people were using. So they were being very ineffective. What I did was I asked around and I found out that there was a program called the Windstorm Insurance Network here in Florida, and they had training classes for their adjusters. And so I looked further into it, and you really didn't have to be an adjuster to go to one of their programs. So I signed up and went to a two-day seminar with that program and learned the terminology and sat with the adjusters and learned what they wanted to hear from the mediators in order to get these cases settled. To my surprise, the next couple of mediations I did, I was better accepted by everybody in the mediation, and we got the cases settled. So our success rate went from like 30 or 40% up to about 80 to 90% in just a matter of weeks. So we were very tickled to take and be able to take and learn their terminology, learn how to work the program, and we became accepted as part of the fold, if you will. So that's basically what we did to become better acquainted with what we were doing and how to mediate these cases successfully. Thank you.
Well, and Gary suggested that I go to and do this course, and I did. And I have learned about roofs, I've learned about flooring, I've learned about pipes, I've learned about a number of different things. And one of the things that I've found is that if I'm dealing with a public adjuster or an adjuster and I don't understand something, I ask. And I've had adjusters email me articles on whether a roof has hail damage or has blisters. I've also found that when the little old lady, that being me, ask one of the adjusters, how many squares is the roof? All of a sudden they're paying attention and they think that I know, and they can go immediately into their discussions with one another about what needs to happen in order for this matter to get resolved. So getting your education is really important. It makes you a much more effective mediator. Now, one of the things that you should understand is that when we get these DFS cases or Department of Financial Services cases, they come with little or no information. They come with the names of the insurance carrier, the names of the property owner, the date of loss, the claim number, and the referral number. And we will have something like water, wind, Hurricane Ian, and that's all we will have. So we always ask to get estimates from the insurance adjuster as well as the public adjuster. It used to be like pulling teeth, but now everybody's gotten found that if the mediator has the estimates, then we are more effective in helping them get their cases settled if that's what they want to do. So you have to learn to read these estimates, and they all come in on a program called Xactimate. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Gary, because you do a lot of, you were the first one to start really working with Xactimate.
Thank you very much. In the typical mediation, I do a opening statement as to do each of the sides, and we try to find out what went wrong, and most importantly, how do we fix it? So when we have estimates, we can actually look at what they're talking about, whether they're talking about a roof damage or pipes or water or flood, whatever it is, and we want to see that both parties on opposite sides are talking about the same claim and the same scope of the disaster. And oftentimes we find out that they're talking about the same thing, but the way they've put their estimate together can vary greatly. Typically, the homeowner and their adjuster want lots of money to fix lots of things, and some of it is not really damage that occurred during the hurricane, but they want to get it fixed anyway. And then the insurance company, of course, they're holding the purse strings, and they want to pay out as little as possible to get the claim settled, but they want to do it correctly. All right. It's not like they're trying to take and short anybody, but they really don't want to overpay, and I really can't say that I blame them. In any case, usually we go through the Xactimate program, and this is supposed to be a program that is adjusted according to the damage in the area of the loss. Okay, and in that program, we can look at it very quickly, determine where the excess is, and ask them about, well, why are you putting this in, and why are you asking this amount of money for this? Now then, one thing we do not do in these claims when we're doing it is we do not go through these estimates line by line. We pick out certain items, okay, and we talk about that. And after we've talked about different prices and that sort of thing, I usually ask them, well, what's your bottom line? What do you want to get this fixed in totality? Okay. If you go line by line, you could be hours, maybe even days, looking at this estimate.
How many angels can dance in the head of a pin?
Right. And so we try to stay away from that type of a situation where we're going, picking this thing apart. We want to look at it, in its totality, and we want to look at what the bottom number is that everybody can get to. And usually the homeowner's adjuster still has a pretty big figure, and the insurance company comes back with something a little bit better, but not good enough. And so we go back and forth and back and forth. And pretty soon, after 15, 20 minutes, we usually arrive at a number that everybody can live with. They may not be totally happy with it, but they can live with it and get their homes repaired. So that's basically it.
One of the things is that there's some what I call magic words that the adjusters use. The public adjuster will say that the Xactimate that the carrier's representative has is a little slim, and the carrier will say that there's a lot of fluff, and the public adjuster's estimate, and both may be true. So what you have to do is that you have to apply your good common sense when you look at one of these Xactimate estimates and say, wait a minute, that roof was repaired that roof was replaced 4 years ago. Why would you need an entire roof re-sheathed? Or why would you need to have to put plywood down on the whole roof? So you don't check your common sense at the door. One of the things that we do before we even step forth into a mediation is that we do our homework on the home. In Florida, I can look at Realtor.com or Zillow and I can actually get a picture of the home. And since I'm a visual learner, it's very helpful for me to look at it. And sometimes they'll have pictures of the interior. So when I get the adjuster's pictures and the Zillow pictures, I can kind of compare them in my own head. This is not for me to be making the decision because I never do that, but it allows me to ask appropriate questions. The other one is I go to the property appraiser's website and I may find building permits there. Now, if I have a public adjuster that says I'm going to need $50,000 for the roof, and I see a permit was pulled 2 months ago for $25,000, when I get everybody in a breakout room, I'll ask about how come you have 25 for the building permit and you're looking for 50. You know, you were really, really lucky, weren't you, to find a good roofer who was able to put that roof on, you know, so inexpensively. That all starts to, you know, get everybody moving in reference to their numbers. But the whole key to this is preparing in advance. Now, when should these mediations take place? That's the other thing, is that immediately after the disaster, what you're going to have is that you're going to mess. I mean, the physical disaster just goes on and on. You don't have infrastructure in place, you don't have electric, you don't have water sometimes, you don't have food, you don't have gasoline, all the roads are blocked. You're trying to put tarp on a roof. Make sure the professional puts the tarp on, because we've had them go up there and tarp them themselves and put the nails in the roof. Not a good thing. But typically 2 to 3 months out is when we start seeing the claims, because that's when the carrier has had a chance to get out there and look, and they've started exchanging the estimates. What will happen then, and this is how the DFS program works, is that if a homeowner's not happy with what the carrier said, what will happen is that the homeowner or their representative will file with the Department of Financial Services a request for mediation. That is held for 21 days to allow the parties to see if they can't come to an agreement. After 21 days, a mediator is assigned. And prior to Ian, these mediators were being assigned fairly rapidly after that 21 days had expired. There's a backlog right now, and that's because Ian was such a monstrous storm and there's so much damage. So everybody is pretty much overwhelmed. But the things that you do to prepare for the mediation allow the homeowner and the carrier to come to an agreement, because it's our job not to settle, not to tell people how to settle it, but to illuminate what I call the soft spots. Those areas that they might want to take a look at if they were ever have to litigate this. Now, one of the things that I want to do is that these mediations are just like circuit civil mediations. And in Florida, in circuit civil mediations, what you have to do is that you have to do an opening statement. And I think that I'm going to let Gary go ahead and do his opening statement, simply because that gives you an idea of what we do in trying to get these resolved. Now, Gary, would you explain a little bit about the opening statement and what you try to do in them?
Sure, thank you. In the opening statement, I want everybody to relax and work together to try to get these cases settled. But we've got a wide variety of people that have done mediation, 2 or 3 of these a day for years and years, and you've got people that come to them that have never been to mediation. So we're trying to get everybody on the same level and understand what we're trying to accomplish in mediation. So I do my opening statement as, you know, I introduce myself. I'm Gary Kettering. I'm a circuit civil mediator here in the state of Florida, and I've been assigned to do your mediation today. Now, a lot of people come to mediation and they're a little nervous and maybe apprehensive. They don't know what it's about, and they think it's going to be something like a trial, and it simply is not going to be a trial. I'm not here to give anybody legal or financial advice. I'm not going to make decisions. It's actually the parties that make the decisions. And in mediation, what we want the people to do is to discuss what happened, what went wrong, and most importantly, how do we fix it? All right. Now, mediation is very special. Okay. It's not like a court hearing because of certain things. First of all, it is a voluntary situation. At any point in time, if you feel mediation is not working in your best interest, simply let us know and we'll end the mediation and you can pursue this somewhere else if that's what you want to do. Also, everything that we talk about in mediation is confidential. That means we don't put our thoughts about mediation on TikTok or Facebook or whatever. We don't share it with the neighbors. If somebody wants to know what happened in mediation, my best advice to you is just say, well, we either did or we didn't settle it, and leave it at that. Okay. So the conversation that we have is limited to just the people that are here in mediation today. All right. Also, if you want to meet privately, okay, with your adjuster, all right, that's fine. Just let us know. We can put you in separate rooms. And as a matter of fact, we're probably going to go into separate rooms here very shortly after the adjusters have had an opportunity to take and give their opening statement. Now, I'm going to try my best not to use big words, okay? There's one that I'm going to use that I don't really particularly care for, and that's called caucus. We're going to caucus. That means we're going to split up into separate rooms, and I'll spend time with you all individually. If you have a question, please ask it. We'll try to find an answer for you. But our goal today is to try to get this situation resolved if that's what you really want to do. Now, I want to caution you about something. If you decide you want to take this to court, right now our court system is pretty well clogged up with other cases. And so it might be a year to 18 months before you even get into court, even though your roof or property is damaged today. Keep that in mind because we've got other hurricanes coming. And if you've got a damaged roof right now, it's not going to get any better if it's hit by another hurricane. So let's try to get this thing resolved at all if possible. Okay. So if you want to stop the mediation, let us know and we can do that. If you want to ask a question, please do it and we'll try to find an answer for you. You know, keep an open mind and talk with each other respectfully, and hope we'll get this thing done today. So that's basically it for my opening statement. So is that good enough?
And how much do you stress your neutrality? How do you handle that neutrality? Because for me, because I'm an attorney and Gary is not, I do talk about the fact that I did practice law for 43 years, but immediately after I do that, I say to the participants, I'm not going to give you any legal advice. I am not going to give you any construction advice. I'm neutral. I'm not on anybody's side. And you certainly don't want to ask me about how to put a roof on. So I cover it hard at the beginning. I don't know. Do you kind of finesse it, Gary, or how do you deal with it?
Well, I you know, ask them if they have any questions about me or my qualifications. Okay. Now I have had the rare situations where I've gone into mediations and I'm with attorneys or adjusters that I've worked with before. And occasionally one of them will say, well, you don't have to give an opening statement because we've all heard it before. And beware of that. That's a trap. Okay. You have to give an opening statement. And the way I usually go around that is I say, well, if you've heard my opening statement before, you won't mind listening to it one more time. And if I've missed something, let me know what it is so we can cover it. Okay. You know, I don't take a long time. My mediation statement is usually 3 to 5 minutes long, and that's it. Okay. So that's basically it for, you know.
And if I've got, if in order to, you know, get around that situation where I've got everybody in the room that has done mediations over and over and over again, including the homeowner, what I'll do, or if I'm reconvening a mediation after we've adjourned it, is I'll do a really quick opening statement, which is, okay, let's go through the basics. I'm neutral. I'm not going to give you any advice. This is voluntary and it's confidential. And I will also indicate that, there are certain things that are not confidential, specifically child abuse, elder abuse, or other things that are reportable by law. Now, if you time that, you'll see it took about 30 seconds. But most people have heard it, and what we're trying to do is that we want to make sure that we comply with what the Florida Circuit Civil rules are, and also I've always watched the homeowner, because if they have not been to a mediation before, I will zero in on them and say, do you understand this? Is everything clear? Are there any questions that you might have? One of the things I've found with homeowners is that we have an elderly population here, and a lot of them are having a difficult time, not only with the fact that their home is damaged, but also they're afraid of the technology. So they've gotten on Zoom. I see them on Zoom, and the first thing I do is that I try to put them at ease. I say, have you used this Zoom before? And if they say no, I say, well, you're only going to have to do one thing. And that is that when I put you in the meeting room or the breakout room, there's going to be a button that says join breakout room. Press the button and stay put, and you will be an expert in Zoom. And they all laugh, and we're on our way. But those are the things that I do. Now, one of the things is that, as we both touched on this, mediations are all about, in this area, is all about the money. The homeowner wants to know what they're going to have to put their house back into pre-loss condition. The insurance carrier wants to know what they're going to have to pay. They don't want to do this line item by line item. They want to get to, they want to know, and they don't want to spend a lot of time because they've got other things that they, especially the homeowner, they just want to get their money and get on with their repairs so that they can get on with their lives. So keep that in mind when you're doing these mediations. It's about the money, and the sooner you get to the money, the better. The other thing is that these mediations boil down to three things: scope, price, and coverage. Is it a covered loss? What are we repairing or replacing? If you have a leaky roof, does that mean that you get your plumbing replaced? Probably not. What is it going to cost? If you have a shingle or 3-tab shingle roof, are they going to pay you $2,500 a square to replace a 3-tab shingle? Probably not. So this is why it's good to know what, know the language when you're talking with these folks. What I do is that right after I give the opening statement, we have the parties explain their position. Gary, you always start with the carrier. I start with the homeowner, and typically the public adjuster, just to kind of get a feel. I keep it light. If there's a possibility to, to bring a little humor into it without being
offensive,
I'll do it. The other thing, and this is what Gary taught me, is use small words, use normal words. They're not going to remember whether or not you were erudite when you were in the mediation. They're probably not even going to remember who you are. But using words, common everyday words, puts everybody at ease. Would you agree, Gary?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I like I said, I think the biggest word I use is people come and they're apprehensive. Okay. And I explain to them nervous. Okay. And I don't want people to be apprehensive or nervous. I want them to calm down, relax, and talk just normally, like we would in a conversation with somebody. One other point that I missed, and excuse me for that. If I have been working with the adjusters or the lawyers on other mediations, okay, I'll greet them and I'll point out that we are friends as far as these mediations are occurring. but we're like business friends. We're not social. We're not going out to dinner or lunch together or playing golf. Ours is a business relationship. And that helps everybody be a little bit more at ease and don't come away and say, well, that mediator, he was real friendly with that attorney. I think they were in cahoots together. And if you're not familiar with the word cahoots, it means that you're buddies outside the mediation.
One of the things that I do when I first start off is that there are so many of these claims. A lot of these adjusters have worked with one another before, but some have not. So I will typically ask before I get started on anything, Mr. Smith, have you worked with Mrs. Jones before? And if they say no, say, well, let's, Mrs. Jones, this is Mr. Smith. We're all going to work on this together, right? And they'll all go, yeah, yeah, yeah. The other thing that I do is before I use anybody's first name, especially in Florida, is I get permission. Culturally, with some of the Hispanic or Latin cultures, they want to be asked before you just dive in using first names. So if you're ever doing one of those, and there may be cultures that you are working with, keep in mind, always ask permission.
Let me jump in there real quick, okay?
Okay.
Because we do have a strong Hispanic culture here in South Florida. A lot of these people don't speak really good English, okay? And they need interpreters. And I've been surprised before. I've had mediations where I'm asking, are you okay? Do you understand? And they sit there and go, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. And then you ask them a question and they can't answer it. They kind of look at you, and just by the nature of how they get by is they'll agree to anything, okay? They'll nod their head and say yes, but they really don't understand anything that you're talking about. So it's always good to find out how fluent these people are in the English language. And if they aren't fluent, then you have to stop the mediation and reconvene when they do have somebody that can translate for you and for them, okay? And oftentimes the public adjusters fluent in Spanish, and we can have them be the interpreter, but we have to get permission of the other side. Are you okay with Fernando being not only the adjuster but also the interpreter? And usually that doesn't present a problem, but you do have to check on that. So that's my 2 cents on that.
If it's a law office, I will say, I will tell them, I will say, look, I'm sure that you've been communicating with this person. So whoever is your translator in the office, why don't you have them come in and work with them so that they're comfortable. What I typically do, and I think that this is something that both Gary and I fully agree on, is let the parties negotiate. Don't jump in unless something's going wrong. First thing, I want everybody to be civil in the mediation. And if it starts to get unprofessional, I will use my breakout room and I will put them in timeout. And typically what I will do is that I will follow them in to the breakout room, I don't bring their client in sometimes, and I don't leave them in another room with somebody else, but I simply say, it's getting a little bit out of hand in there. And they almost always, they'll say, you're right, thank you. But we want to keep it civil. We want to let the parties adjust. And if you have 2 old-time adjusters, they get right down to it. And I've watched 2 of them just go, I can do this, no, I can't do that, and stay out of it. You're not there for any reason other than to facilitate an agreement. So be quiet. Only jump in if the wheels are about to come off the wagon, or if somebody looks at you and says, can I have some, can we go into a separate room? Then you're needed. Right. You agree with that, Gary?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can talk yourself out of a settlement in 30 seconds. that took you 3 hours to get to. So keep quiet, let the parties, as long as they're behaving themselves and conversing professionally, let them go for it, okay? And they'll get it done for you. So that's good advice.
I use my breakout rooms to ask the difficult questions. I know we talked a little bit about where I found a permit. I don't bring that up in opening statement. I just sit on it. And then I will go in with the public adjuster and I will say, you know, it looks like you've had this roof repaired. I mean, looking at a copy of the permit, and it looks like you got a really good deal on the roof. It looks like it was about $20,000. And sometimes I find stuff out because the homeowner will say they made that mistake there. It wasn't 20, it was 25. And so what I do is I give the adjuster an opportunity to adjust their position in reference to the roof. Or if I'm in with the carrier's side, I say, there's a permit that's been pulled on this for $20,000. What do you mean it can be repaired, you know, for $10,000? You know, it goes both ways, and you have to be an advocate for the other side in the other room. So you've got to be neutral on these, and you've got to be knowledgeable.
Let
As
me add,
Gary said,
let me add something real quick about these breakout rooms. Anything you learn in that breakout room is confidential to the parties only in that breakout room. And before you leave the breakout room to join the open session or the session with the other party, I always ask, is there anything we talked about that you don't want me to bring up with the other side? Okay. If you go out and slip something into the conversation and the people say, well, wow, we didn't know that. And you go back and say, well, we got a deal, and they say, well, what is it? And they find out that you let some confidential information out. That can end the mediation immediately. Okay. And also,
and it also can put you in front of
put you in some really big trouble with the Department of Finance and the DRC. So you want to be discreet, okay, when you go from one room to the next, and you also want to ask permission about revealing information to the other side. So
I always ask when I leave the room, is there anything that you do not want me to discuss in the other room?
Right.
That will cover all of your bases. These mediations should not take more than 2 hours. Oftentimes we're done in less than an hour. But that is because you've got to get right down to what I call the money, and right down to what the difference between the problems that the parties are having. One of the things is that, let's say these DFS allows you 2 hours for a mediation. If we're working pretty well together and it's 2 hours and 1 minute, I'll keep going on the mediation until we get it resolved. We heard, you know, we know of situations where mediators have just said, okay, 2 hours, goodbye. That's not the way to do it. If you need more time, you know, take it, but don't let them go line item by line item. And I'm not a fan of brackets. Some people live by them. I'm not crazy for them. So I don't typically use them. Now, one of the things I want to tell everybody, just because the parties are far, far apart, don't give up. I don't know how many times we've had one come in at 20 and the other come in at 150 and have ended up settling it. Because remember, typically the appraiser's side may be a little skinny and there may be a lot of fluff on the public adjuster's side. That's not always, but sometimes that happens.
Well, it looks like we're about out of time. So,
well, we got one other thing to cover, and
okay.
That's in-person mediations versus Zoom mediations. We do all of ours by Zoom because we found it's a very, very effective method of doing mediations. But some people prefer in-person mediations, and there's a good reason to do those. For some people, they find that Zoom can be somewhat impersonal, and that they feel they have a better understanding of the parties if they're actually in the room with them, and that it is more personal, and that it is something that they're used to doing, and the parties have more of a comfort level with having the mediator actually in the room. That's individual mediators' preferences. One of the things that we have found is that, and this is why we do ours now remotely, is that the advantages of in-person mediations are outweighed by the disadvantages. Mediations by Zoom are a lot easier to schedule, especially in this area. You've got a whole bunch of parties that you have to get together, and it's easier to get them together if they can come in by computer. It's more flexible. And the other thing is it's safer for all of the participants and gives us higher control of the environment. When I did family mediation, I can tell you that I remember times where we would have to check the parking lot to make sure that nobody that wasn't supposed to be in the parking lot was in the parking lot. We would have to make sure that somebody was not listening at the keyhole. I think you had one, Gary, where you opened the door real fast and somebody fell in because they were listening at the keyhole.
Yeah, that doesn't happen with Zoom.
We have had people destroy the interior of our office when they were unhappy with the mediation. And so it gives us better control, and it allows the parties to feel more secure, knowing that there's nobody out there waiting for them, that they can express themselves, and there's nobody listening in. And the thing is that if in fact somebody gets out of control, and it doesn't happen very often, but occasionally it does, we can remove that person instantly from the room. The biggest criticism that they have of remote technology is that it's difficult to police and enforce confidentiality. Well, what I'd like to do is I'm going to give everybody a reality check on enforcing confidentiality. With cell phones and devices, if somebody wants to go talk to somebody, they're going to take their device, they're going to go into the bathroom, and they're going to have that conversation. And I personally am not going to pat them down to see if they've got a cell phone. You actually had somebody recording you with a pin in their pocket, didn't you?
Yeah.
So hopefully we've given you something to think about, and hopefully this has been helpful to you all. What I'd like to do is that if you have questions, please feel free to contact us. We can be reached at mediation4u.com, or you can email us at mediation4u.com or mediationsrq. That's the airport code for Sarasota Bradenton Airport at yahoo.com. We'll be happy to answer any of your questions, and if you want to see copies of the statute or any of the information, I'll be more than happy to send it to you. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you all have a great day. Gary, is there anything you want to say to wrap it up?
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening. I hope it's been helpful. And if, like Leslie said, if you've got any question, please feel free to contact us. So thank you very much.
Thank you.